Hi folks, Deermeyer1 here. Today I've got a little video about Marlin Model 81 rifles, and I think this video will also pertain to one or two other models of Marlin rifles that are very similar in design and construction. I'm not the Marlin expert, and not a professional gunsmith or anything like that. Professional gunsmith, lifelong gearhead, or professional mechanic, lifelong gearhead, amateur gunsmith. And I just have quite a long history with this particular Model 81, and I'm familiar with an issue that affects this rifle and I believe a few others. And basically, it's a wear issue that eventually will cause the rifle to become non-functional because the cartridge elevator inside the rifle will no longer work properly to bring cartridges out of the tube magazine up into and in front of the bolt to be chambered. There's also an issue there. My lighting's not very good here, but there's an issue with a little bullet guide that is in the very top front of the chamber there, that breaks, and it basically is a little spring-loaded guide for the nose of the bullet to guide it down into the chamber. That can be addressed as well, and I actually have a new one for this rifle, but I haven't replaced it because in my experience the rifle works good about 95% of the time anyway, even when that guide is broken. I don't think this rifle has ever had one functional and intact as long as I've owned it, which has been for roughly 25 years now, and I've put lots and lots of rounds of ammo through this rifle, and eventually the problem I ran into is the one with the cartridge elevator, and I'm going to show you how I fixed that without spending any money. You can no longer get those cartridge elevators as a new part from Marlin. Haven't been able to for quite some time. Companies like Numrich Gun Parts, which sells used, some used gun parts. They part out guns and stuff too. They've long been sold out of them. And if you can find one on eBay or otherwise find a used one, typically they're like $65, $75. I've seen them maybe as high as $100. 25 years ago, I bought this entire rifle for $70 or $75 at an estate auction. They're outstanding rifles. This thing is a tack driver, just an amazing, amazing quality of rifle as far as the steel, the blue. It's in very good, original condition. Like I said, very accurate, high capacity. The tube magazine holds like 25, 22 shorts and about 17 long rifles, and it's never been drilled, tapped for a scope. It's just a beautiful rifle, and it's just a lot of fun to shoot. And I just wanted to save it, but at the same time I couldn't really justify, basically knocking another rifle in the head to keep this one in service, or buying another one and parting one out and having one, that was no good. It's a different situation. Over here is a project I'm doing for a friend of mine with a 1906 Winchester. He brought that rifle to me and all rusted up and in horrible condition. Not quite that horrible condition, but still pretty rusty. And brought me the other one as a wall hanger gift, I guess. But fortunately, I'm able to. There's a few parts I need for the rifle I'm trying to put back together and get back into service that are intact on the parts gun over there. So I'm going to be able to mix and match, and it's interesting that this the one I'm bringing back into service already consists of at least two rifles with two different serial numbers on the receiver and on the. Let's see, where's the other serial number located on those things? I can't even remember right off the top of my head, but it does have two different serial numbers on it. I've noticed. Oh, there's one on the receiver, I believe. Yes, there's one on the receiver and one on the receiver itself, one on the trigger guard assembly, and two different serial numbers. So basically, when I'm done with it, that the one rifle will have parts from at least 3 different guns in it. But that's just a different deal. It'll just be hopefully a plinker. It's just a worn out old rifle, and mainly I'm doing it out of experience, not to try to, or for the experience, not to try to actually bring it back as a you know, a really good condition shooter. But what I'm going to do is turn the camera off here, and I'm going to get the receiver, barreled receiver out of the stock here on this Model 81 and get it set up, and I'll show you what the problem is with these rifles, what happens, what wear occurs, and how I kind of stumbled across a way to fix it. And it certainly wasn't a brilliant idea I had, you know, right away. It took me probably a couple years of at various times piddling around with this rifle and you know, looking for used parts and whatnot before it finally occurred to me to try something different, and it ended up working out. So I'll get this thing broken down and we'll start over here. Alright, here's the rifle out of the stock, and basically you still can't see exactly what's going on in here just because of the way that cartridge elevator is constructed with the solid sides. But what happens is the bolt comes forward, it pushes down on the center hinged portion of the cartridge elevator, it shoves it downward, and against spring pressure here, and it shoves it downward far enough that this edge right here, the top edge, has to drop far enough for a cartridge case to be shoved, or cartridge head to be shoved back and over it by the spring tension in the tube magazine, you know, guide rod spring plunger assembly. And what happens is eventually there's enough wear, and it can happen in 2 places in the rifle, that does not get pushed down far enough for the next cartridge to come back, and you don't get a cartridge coming back, you don't get one coming up and into the rifle. There's 2 places that wear can occur, and I'm going to set the camera down for a second here. Two places that wear can occur. And the first place is on the this rotating head on the front of the bolt, specifically on this area of the bolt. And this part often is still available. You just have to be careful. Number one, you have to know that's where the wear occurs. And actually the bolt, that is really super hard metal, and I don't see a lot of that wear occurring on this one. If it does, it's right there at the very point, and you have to be careful because there's like 2 different styles of this head available on like the Model 81s, I think, and then I don't know about other rifles. But usually, from everything I gather, 90% of the time we're talking about a cartridge elevator issue itself. And what I got to, like I said, I just kind of happened to stumble across this one day when I was tinkering with this rifle. And it occurred to me that if this isn't going down far enough, and it has to be occurring out at the edge, you know, out at the end, just above the center of my thumbnail there, that if I could just come up with a way to lower that portion, because that's no longer obviously being held down by the bolt, the very front section is. The bolt's acting further back, and there's actually, the other part is, like I said, when it's assembled it's really hard to tell, but the section the bolt is actually working against isn't this section. This is all where the cartridge is located as it gets cammed up into position. The actual point on this piece, it's on this piece, but it is not this part of this piece, is back behind the pin, or above where the hinge pin is back here. So, and maybe I'll take this one apart and pull this cartridge elevator. Actually, all you have to do to get the cartridge elevator out is take this this spring off, and then pay attention to how it's installed, and then slide that pin out, and this whole assembly will just come out of the rifle. But basically, my sort of brainstorm was to just take my die grinder, and you could also use a file, and I just relieved this area, this top curved area, and ground that down. It took, like, with a die grinder and a carbide bit, it took very little, very little attention, very little material removed to do it, to just drop that shelf down and that edge down a little bit so the cartridges can come on back even though the elevator isn't pushed down as far. And basically I ground it once and it worked perfectly, and I don't think I ground it anymore. I noticed that when this was all apart, there's like a line, that looks like maybe that's where it was heat treated. I tried to leave as much of that as possible, and this rifle's probably never going to see high volume shooting again as long as I own it. I put many bricks of 22 through it, but that was long ago when it was just when shooting 22 was kind of one of my main pastimes, and where I was and what I was doing at the moment, as far as living and going to school and whatnot. So I'll probably never wear it out again. But anyway, that's what I came up with to fix these rifles, because like I said, you can hardly find used parts anymore, and when you do, that's kind of the big iffy question. You might be dealing with a rifle, your particular rifle might have had the shell elevator replaced previously. Maybe the majority of your wear is on the bolt, or enough of it is on the bolt that you buy a used shell elevator from somebody else, on eBay or wherever you happen to get one, or buy a used parts gun that's seems to work okay the way it is, but you mix and match parts from two old guns and maybe it doesn't end up working, or not for very long, and you're right back in the same boat. If those parts are shot anyway, you really don't have anything to lose by trying to relieve this and knock it down a little bit, and try that as far as seeing if that'll cure your problem. And I think probably most of the time you'll find that it will. So just another option to give some thought to if you have one of these awesome old Marlin bolt action rifles, which are really kind of the pinnacle, I think, of Marlin quality. I've got a Marlin Model 60 50th anniversary edition that I honestly think is kind of a piece of crap in quality wise compared to this old rifle. It just, for various reasons, it just is. Screws that were loose are missing from the factory. One in the trigger guard that's missing. That, like I said, it was either missing from the factory and I was just too dumb and wasn't observant enough to notice it when I bought the rifle or ever handled it, or it was so loose that it fell out in the one or two relatively short trips to the range where I've actually fired it. But either way, it's missing. Product control, quality control. And I understand Marlin kind of has realized that and is trying to make some steps to take it the other way, but it's almost every gun company you come across. You look at their products 50, 60 years ago, and you look at the quality involved in what they make today, and there's really no comparison. But anyway, that might get your old Marlin up and running, and like I said, if it's worn out and it's not working anyway, you don't have really anything to lose. So give it a try. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there is that bullet guide there. Once in a great while, I'll get a bullet that wants to hang up, and honestly, you can just push it down with your finger, and get it to go in there. I have a new guide, but it requires, you know, this pin has to be removed, the barrel has to be removed from the receiver. I don't have brass jaws or anything for my vise. I don't want to nick up and mark up any of this stuff, you know, to replace that part until it's absolutely necessary. So to date, I haven't messed with that. So that's up to you. Like I said, you know, you might run across a situation where you're looking at a video or a, you know, a forum or whatever, and the guy says, well, it's either, you know, your bullet guide or your cartridge erector that's, well, if you have consistent bullet feeding problems but you're still getting them up there, yeah, it could be the bullet guide. Obviously, if it's broken off, that might be part of it, but that can also be a problem with the cartridge ejector or erector just being worn, or the bolt being worn, and actually the thing is bringing up the cartridge too far. And that's just one of the idiosyncrasies of these things, and that can happen as well, as they wear in different places or different parts wear. But eventually you keep shooting it, you'll get to the point where it's worn and it's not going to be bringing them up at all. But anyway, kind of a long, drug out explanation of how to fix a relatively simple problem in a simple manner. But I like to explain myself in my videos instead of just saying do this, this, and this, and that way guys can make an informed decision on what they're doing and why. And I'm not an expert, so like a lot of the other guys on YouTube. So I try to explain myself and pass along some information and knowledge instead of just, you know, giving orders the way some guys do on what to do and how to do it. Leave it up to you guys to decide whether it's worthwhile. So thanks for watching.